Hey Ottawa, this is your Monday market snapshot for the Ottawa real estate market. Today is April 29th, 2024, and my name is Annalie Rice, and I'm a realtor here in Ottawa, Ontario, and every week I bring you the details of what is going on in the Ottawa real estate market. Now, this being just the last couple days of April, I've included a bunch of the month-end stuff. Of course, it is all a little bit a few days early, so it'll give us a good picture of what's happened throughout April, but the numbers will get updated next week with the final numbers being in. So let's go and see what's happening. Okay, so citywide, we see that the active listings continue to climb. We had 47 more active listings this week than last week. It's mostly in the detached and condo markets, just slightly for townhomes. While the sales actually dropped this week, so they were down by 32 compared to last week. It's a little bit of a drop off, and I'll discuss that a little bit more later. You can see that the detached sales decreased by the least. Condos had a big drop, and then townhomes also had a large drop. Okay, here's the visuals of the inventory. And you can see that our overall inventory, that's the black line, is almost at the same peak as it was last year. But if you see where the peak was last year, it was in late October. So last year, the active inventory, you can see that's in the green. We were sitting at about 1,500 active inventory all the way through until mid-May. And here we are now up at well over 2,100. So we're at about 45% more active inventory right now than we were last year at this time. You can see the sales are similar to last year. This week it actually was lower than what we would have had last week, but I do have confidence that I think more sales are coming, and so our sales are kind of on par to what we had last year, a little bit higher, but it's definitely not at the levels pre-pandemic normal levels. Okay, so now let's look at the new listings. So we had 503 properties that were listed this week. That's just down just slightly from what we had last week, and our highest so far this year was 3 weeks ago. But of those 503, 105 or 21% were relisted properties, and 398 or 79% were new to the market. So you can see that the number of relisted properties is climbing, but that's sort of in same proportion as to the number of new listings we have. Okay, so sales this week. We had 277 sales this week, and 19% of those sales were with no conditions, and 31% were properties that sold at or above asking. So that's the overall. When we look at just the ones that were within 7 days, we had 17% of the sales happened within 7 days. That was 48 properties. And of those 48 properties, 52% of them, so just over half, sold with no conditions, and 71% of those sold at or above asking price. I'll get into the details on the at or above asking price on the next slide. And then when we look at the sales within 30 days, we had 68% of the sales happened were properties that had sold within 30 days on the market. That was 187 properties. And 22% of those sold with no conditions, which is obviously slightly higher than the overall average. And 36% sold at or above asking price. Okay, so this slide is all about the at or above asking stat. I'll be honest, going into these stats actually takes a lot of time, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to keep it up, but I did try to simplify it and see if I can do it in a bit more easy way, but still present the info that would be helpful to people. So first off, of the 86 properties that had sold at or above asking, 38 of them, that was 44%, sold between either at asking price or up to $1,000 above asking price. So those ones I would categorize as pretty much at asking price, or just slightly over, just to differentiate yourself from somebody who's just below. Another 26 homes, that was 30% of the sales, were ones that had sold between $1,000 and $10,000 above asking price. For the most part, these were ones that were like, rounding up like 2,500 or 5,000 above. A couple of them were 10,000 above. This would be more of an example of when someone either the house is priced just at like a $599,900 or $499,900, and they expect that it'll probably sell a little bit above that, but and it'll get multiple offers, but then somebody just adds that extra little bit to try and get the home. So not ridiculously high above. The percentages over will differ depending on the price of the home. Obviously, it could be probably mostly less than 1%, maybe slightly over 1% above asking price at that point. The next sort of bracket was homes that sold above that 10,000, and it ended up being that 17 homes had sold between 1.3 and 4.7. That was just sort of me calculating them. And the asking prices were between 11 and 35,000 over. And again, 11,000 could be something that's on a cheaper home with a higher percentage, or 35,000 on a million plus home isn't very much in percentage wise, but it might have a bit of a higher dollar value. Then the highest bracket, so I sort of differentiated between the ones that were sort of, I'm going to call them somewhat reasonable over asking, but then there were 5 homes that sold for more than 5% of asking price. In most of these cases, it was like, 50,000 over. There was one that was 75,000 over. But the one that sort of stood out, and it was very much an outlier, the rest of them were, I think there was one at 10%. The outlier was one home that sold 32% over asking price, listed at 1.1, and sold for 1.45. So obviously that is a huge amount over, both dollar-wise and percentage-wise. It was a house downtown, somewhere near the canal and stuff, so it might have been a very, specific house and a specific buyer that really wanted that property. Okay, so let's move into more detail on what happened in the different areas of the city. Okay, so the central urban region, we see that the active inventory climbed across property types, but mostly in the condo market, and sales were down drastically for detached, although they might have been peaked last week there. Townhomes slightly down and condos up slightly. In Canada and Stittsville, the active inventory climbed for detached homes, and I noticed that it's very high. 175 detached homes in Canada right now. It's very high. Townhomes just up slightly, condos down just 1. And sales were down across townhomes and condos, quite significantly for condos, although that would have been a really high number last week at 16. And detached had a big jump in the number of sales. It was up 17, which is huge. In Barrhaven and Riverside South, we have slight decreases for detached in towns on the market, quite significant jump for the number of condos on the market, and the sales were down for detached in towns, pretty slow, and condos were up just 2. In Orleans, we had steady for condos and up slightly for detached, down slightly for townhomes. And in sales, it was steady for detached and down for towns and condos. As always, here are the full details of what's active, conditional, and sold in the different areas. I would notice that last week I had made the comment that the number of conditionally sold properties was lower than the number of sold properties. And as a result, we ended up having fewer sales this week compared to what we had last week. I did notice that this week, most of the conditional sale numbers are higher than the sale numbers. So hopefully this means that next week we'll have a bit of a rebound on the number of sales, firm sales that is. Same thing for townhomes, although here most of the conditional to sold is a lot more balanced. And condos. Again, we've got more, in most cases, we've got more conditionally sold properties than sales this week. So hopefully we'll have a higher number of sales next week. Okay, so as we're in the last couple of days of April, I decided to pull the numbers for the average sale prices for April. These numbers will shift slightly as all the sales, there'll be a bunch of sales today and tomorrow that will count for April, and the averages will shift slightly. On whole, I would say that, you see every property type, the average sale price is up. The semi-detached, quite drastically so, and even after last month, they had about a 9% increase. So that is, again, I've mentioned it every month, is that, there's a lot of volatility in the semi-detached prices based on what semi-detached homes are selling. If it's all Westboro semis that are selling, then that average gets pulled up very quickly. If it's older 1950s semis and Nepean, then it'll be a lot lower. So it really is depending on what is selling. But for the others, just a slight increase for detached, the slightest amount for freehold townhomes. And the condos actually had sort of a consistent and steady climb for the average sale price. These charts, the next 4 charts, are the visuals of that. So you can see the black lines are for 2024 values. You can see the slight climbing, and it is pretty normal to have spring prices climbing. The one anomaly year was obviously 2022, where the peak prices were super high and then dropped off quite quickly. But this is, the numbers are pretty standard here. The semi-detached by year, here we go, and you can see that it's, up, it's on par from last year and actually almost peaked the same as the 2022 prices. But again, caution on semi-detached. Average sale prices are very type specific. Okay, and so this is the freehold townhomes, and you can see that, compared to last year, we're just up slightly, and also month to month up slightly. Again, the anomaly is the 2022 spike there. And then this chart is the condos, all condos. I did not separate it between apartments and row townhomes. So you can see it's been a steady incline month to month. That's the black lines. And that we're a little bit above what we were in 2023. And obviously the spike in 2022 is still above us, but 2021, the average sale price was lower. Okay, so this next charts are the close price to the original list price ratio. And again, these are pulled on the 28th of April, so these will get updated next week and they'll probably shift a little bit. But it is notable that you can see that they've peaked, that they're all slightly below what we saw last month. So I think this is sort of a show of the fact that, all that inventory that's on the market is causing homes to sell less often above asking price, which I think we're, with all the charts that I've been sharing week to week, I think we know that, but it's just a little bit calming down of the market. Okay, so these charts are the average days to sell, and you can see that obviously they increase through the slow months of the winter and then usually drop off fairly steadily through the spring. We can see that for the detached and the condos, the numbers actually increased over the last month, which just means that, with higher inventory levels, a little bit more options out there for buyers, then it takes a little longer for the average house to sell. Okay, so I will caution this one. This is the monthly sales, the number of sales, the monthly sales for the last 10 years. And you can see that right now, the black line, which is the 2024 line, is below where we were for the 2023 line. This number was pulled on the morning of the 29th. However, it will definitely climb up above that blue line. But you can see that, like the last 3 months, our numbers, even if it climbs up a little bit by another 100 or so, 150, 100 sales, it's still going to be not much above the blue line for the 2023, and it's going to be well below the last 5 years, the last 10-year average. So the sales are still slow this year, and despite all of this inventory, we're not getting higher sales. Okay, so that's the update for this week. I do want to sort of just make a comment. I've talked about it many times, that the inventory being higher levels is going to keep a damper on those prices. Although they're up slightly, that's not so much because they're climbing. The inventory is keeping the prices fairly steady, which is great for the buyers. I guess our next big question mark will be whether or not the Bank of Canada decides to lower the overnight lending rate in June. I think that's the next rate announcement, and what effect that may or may not have on the market and buyers' sentiments of believing that it's a better time to buy. The overnight lending rate doesn't directly affect buyers. Most people are taking fixed mortgages these days, and they're not affected by the overnight lending rate, but it's the sentiment. It's all the news articles that come out and say that the rates are dropping, the economy has turned that corner and they're going to start dropping the rates. So it's just the sentiment. People believe that it's a better time, so they start buying. So if they drop the rate, will the sales pick up? Will that inventory get gobbled up? Who knows? There is more inventory coming on every single week. And I imagine that even just next week or in the next 2 weeks, we're going to climb to above what we saw last year in the fall. So that's great for if the sales do pick up, that will be some choices for a while. It's just, we're going to have to sit and wait and see whether or not the market's going to have sort of a second wind with the rate announcements or some other factor that's going to play into the things. Anyways, that was a long summary, but if you did listen this long, then thank you very much for listening, and please give it a thumbs up or a comment. Share this with other people that you might think that they'd enjoy this content. Have a great week.